In our readings today, we focus on the birth and naming of John the Baptist. It's a busy scene as the neighbors and relatives of Elizabeth and Zechariah descend upon the couple at such a wonderful time. The gospel writer Luke tells us of the great commotion around what the child should be named. The speculation is that he would be called Zechariah. So imagine that, Zechariah the Baptist. It doesn't quite have the same ring to it. But at this point in the story, the father Zechariah cannot speak, so Elizabeth raises her prophetic voice. She boldly says, "He will be called John." The neighbors and relatives ignore her wisdom. However, her husband Zechariah stopped them cold and emphatically wrote out this phrase, "John is his name." The case was settled. Why is it so important for Luke to give us such detail and attention around the whole naming issue? Let's look at the child's two possible names. The assumed choice of Zechariah is a Hebrew name, meaning God remembers. And the eventual choice of John is also a Hebrew name, meaning God is gracious. One name speaks of God's memory of the past, while the other speaks of God's grace in the present. It is important that the name John was chosen as his eventual ministry would point towards Jesus, the ultimate embodiment of God's grace in the world. John the Baptist would fulfill the prophet Malachi's words from today's first reading. "Lo, I am sending my messenger to prepare the way before me." The Baptist work is not to look backward, but to invite us to reflect on our present. We are also called to continue John's work by preparing the way for God's grace and love in this world. The psalm response today notes that the way of the Lord is filled with goodness, kindness, constancy, friendship, humility, and justice. These are signs of God's grace. And how can we share it in our own corner of the world? Through goodness, kindness, constancy, friendship, humility, and justice. Sometimes these graces are welcomed, and sometimes they are not. Let us not be discouraged, for our work is not to be the way, but to prepare the way. We never know how God will work in people's hearts. John's mother, Elizabeth, raised her prophetic voice to herald God's grace, but she was ignored. And yet she persisted and taught her son that same prophetic wisdom which he would exhibit throughout his life. We never know how God will work. God is indeed gracious and merciful. His way is patient, kind, faithful, warm, humble, and just. John the Baptist's name and life proved that as he heralded the coming of Jesus, the perfection of God's grace. Let us never stop tiring of sharing that message today. May our prophetic voices be joined with Elizabeth and John the Baptist. May we prepare the Lord's way of grace this day and always. May God's blessing be on you at Christmas and all year long.